I didn't know that anyway.
Yeah, the drive till that morning.
Hello, how are you all? Okay, well, today we hear from the Minister for Communications that they're considering another energy credit before the end of the year. We know that consumers had to wait a long time before they legislated for the first one, and while that's all well and good, I think that this government really misses the crisis that households, that families, that workers are going through at this point in time. And what we need is something more ambitious from this government. We need something that will go deeper, that will help those individuals at this point in time, and that is why Sinn Féin will be putting forward to government our suite of proposals in the next number of weeks that will look at reducing the cost of electricity, capping it back at the pre-energy crisis level. We'll look at coupling that with cost of living cash payments that will be income linked, and along with that, recognising that different households have different energy consumption and therefore looking for a doubling of child benefit to take that into account, along with a suite of other measures like extending the 9% VAT rate on gas and electricity prices, ensuring that there is no excise duty on home heating oil, and a number of other measures will make up our package that will make a real meaningful impact in the middle of what is a real crisis for people. And I'm concerned that the government doesn't fully understand the real crisis that is happening in workers and families' households at this point in time. So I'm happy to take any questions in relation to that or any other matter. We will be submitting our budget for next year in the coming weeks. We're working with the Department of Finance and Public Expenditure and some of the costings in relation to the cap on energy prices back to pre-crisis level. We're working with the CRU in relation to some of the detail on this, but it is that type of ambitious package that we need, that type of response that we need right here and right now.
Pierce, just on the doubling of child benefit, do you mean as in double what the current rate is, so every month whatever?
It's a once-off payment to take account of the fact that there is higher energy consumption in larger households, so it's a doubling of child benefit.
Just once off?
Once off,
that
yes.
is something the government is currently looking at, so you're happy to see that then, obviously?
If they come forward with that would be welcome, but that on itself won't cut it. And that's why we need to see electricity prices, which have increased by more than €1,000 for average households over the last period. We need to see those prices brought back down to pre-crisis level. What we would do is we would reduce that, cap that electricity price during the winter months where households use between 50 and 75% of their energy usage. So to make sure that households are not fearful of the winter, but are able to get through this winter with those type of supports. But again, that in its own still won't meet the needs of households, and that's why we need to see some cost of living cash payments also paid out before the end of the year.
Do you think there should be an increase in child benefit at what current stands?
Well, we're not proposing an increase in child benefit. We're proposing a doubling, a double payment this year. To take account of the energy crisis. What we will see then for next year is a suite of measures that will look at vulnerable households in terms of a significant social welfare package that we'll be proposing to government.
Pierce, it looks like the government's cost of living package of once-off measures is going to amount to about €2 billion, perhaps a bit more. Is that sufficient, and have you an estimate for how much Sinn Féin's proposals would cost?
Well, let me just give you, as I said, we're working with the CRU in relation to the pegging of the electricity price back to a pre-crisis rate, but our estimation is that could cost up to €1.7 billion on its own. So taking into account that is just one measure, we want to see cost of living cash payments as well. We want to see the doubling of child benefit, which will be another $175 million. The extension of the 9% VAT rate to the end of the year and beyond, again another $75 million. The removing in its entirety of excise duty from home heating oil, where a third of homes use that source of energy to heat their homes, again costs up to February another €75 million. On top of that, we want to see other measures, for example in terms of the cost of living. So we want to see childcare costs reduced by a third this September. We want to see that happen right here, right now. We want to see renters getting that relief, which we've argued for many years in terms of the refundable tax credit. So there are a suite of measures that 2 billion simply won't cut it. And let me say this here.
But the once-off measures that Sinn Féin is planning, what's the ballpark?
Well, as I said, the energy one could come in at least 1.7 billion, and that's only for a period of time. That would have to be then reviewed at the end of the winter and looked at whether it needed to be extended or which it needed to be tapered down. And there's a number of other measures that we'll be putting forward.
Will it exceed 2 billion anyway? Is that?
Oh, absolutely. It will exceed 2 billion. And I make the point here that when the government announced the budget last year, they expected that we would have an €8 billion deficit. The Irish Fiscal Advisory Council expect that we will have a €4.5 billion surplus. So we're in a €12.5 billion better space. We have the space to make sure that we protect and support families and workers as best we can. And we need real ambition from government at this point in time to do that.
Do you have a view on windfall tax?
We've argued for windfall tax before the summer. We made it clear that if there was exploitation by energy companies, then windfall tax would need to be brought in, and it will need to be brought in. The European Union are talking about windfall tax in operators. We will also need to see that in relation to suppliers. We've argued for an excess profits tax. Some countries in Europe are already applying this for quite a while. No company should be profiteering at a time when people are worried and concerned about heating their homes and keeping their families safe at this point in time. It's clear that it is happening, that excess profits are being made. That's why government should have acted and need to act fast.
So you agree with the government message that we heard from Eamon Ryan last night that they'd be encouraging households to use less electricity, we'll say like dishwasher, washing machine, etc. between 4 and 7 p.m. Do you agree with that?
Look, I think households aren't stupid. People see the bills rolling in. People see the inaction from government. People are trying to curb the electricity usage themselves. What they're looking for government isn't to be given advice. We've heard it from other ministers about shopping around and all of that, and that just grates on people. What we need is action. There are people out there that simply don't know how they're going to meet the next bill. They need the cabinet and ministers like Eamon Ryan to stand up and say, we're going to take decisive action here. We're going to make sure electricity prices are going to be back at the level before this crisis. We're going to provide cash payments directed at the most vulnerable. We're going to provide additional supports, and we're going to get you through as best we can this crisis. I'm not hearing those sounds from Eamon Ryan, and in the absence of that, some of the other messages, regardless of the validity of them, grate on the Irish people.
For the other sides are, that we Súlis and tourists got Cola some argument issues are North Urban told us law or fraud or equal on shit.
Not correct, yeah.
Yeah, North Urban told us law or fraud.
Sarah, Neil and Twirish Fikigum Martesiga, Nulsigum Gigafolia Ted is a Twirish. Beisha Moila Leo Tikum Goal Chinese Mona Mila Yehana, so Lakisha Tumult Hall Region Twirish Granumlan, Acta Majid Fanart or Shala Tumult Father Bayme a Kanchini Smolye, Lindaman, or a 10 Twirish Falshikas, or at a Jeshigum, Hall Fridge, Kutch in the Sunray, all they can function.
On energy, one more. This is a European problem. It's going to be solved at the European level, as announced today by the Commission President, through things like price caps, through things like windfall taxes, through things like mandatory levels of consumption at peak hours. And that to a certain extent, whether it's you or anyone else in Leinster House, just messing around with the margins.
It's obviously wider even than the European issue. It's a global issue, and as we transition away from fossil fuels, we will see spikes and volatility in the markets. So there is a role for all the players. There's a role for the European Union, and they will discuss those measures, which hopefully will have an impact on the price of energy here. Looking at the mix, the non-gas mix that we have in energy, which is made up of about 60%. So that will have hopefully a downward pressure on energy prices, but it won't be enough. And that's why domestic players have to step up to the plate as well. That's why this government has to step up to the plate and say that these prices increases, which, you know, if you take energy and gas together, it's €2,000 more than what it was last year. On top of fuel, on top of food, these families are at breaking point, and that's why they needed a response before the summer from the government. They needed that support from government. Government abdicated in their responsibility. Now we're going to have a budget in 2 weeks' time, and this is where government need to understand the real crisis that's out there. It can't be small piecemeal measures. There needs to be ambition here. There needs to be an understanding where ordinary workers and families are at, and we need to have policies that reflect that.
Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you.
Hopefully that's well. I don't know.